Welcome to the Geekdom, Episode 3, Toys, Our First Passion.
Just your ability to make something out of nothing.
Welcome to the Geekdom is awesome!
I've been playing with toys since I was 6.
Conan,
Conan the Barbarian,
Transformers, Battletech,
Dungeons & Dragons,
the sexy Barbie,
Robotech, Macross,
Transformers, Robotech,
G.I. Joe,
Voltron,
Ultraman, and Godzilla.
Most of us meet toys when we're young, before we have the words to explain why they matter. We just know we love them. But over time, those objects can become something more. A connection to memory, a doorway into friendship, a spark for creativity, even the beginning of a story we spend our lives trying to tell. In Geekdom, toys are not something we outgrow.
I think it really just comes from early on just being incredibly attached to certain things. And as you get older, that attachment never leaves.
My dad had a small business in Japan, and every time he'd go to Japan, I'd beg him to bring me back a toy.
Whether it be G.I. Joe or Tron or Star Wars or He-Man, when other people just kind of go, oh yeah, that was, my teenage years, or I'm no longer a kid, I'm not going to play with toys. And I'm just like, but no, that stuff's the greatest stuff in the world.
He would bring me back these ginormous robots that had like so many different pieces. They were so different than American toys, and they're so complicated, and they're all metal. They're beautiful, and I'm like, this is the most amazing things. And then other times he'd just bring me back a really simple, their version of an action figure. And Japanese action figures called safubi, they're very limited in articulation, but there's something so charming. You can see the hand sculpt of it.
You know Legos and you build the Millennium Falcon? Well, I'm the guy that had the Millennium Falcon before the kits were done. So we would cut them ourselves and build it. So I've been a nerd my entire life.
As I grew older, I still kept to that comic books and toys, and that's what I live for.
As we grow, play changes shape. The action figure becomes a miniature. The toy box becomes a battlefield, a kingdom, a campaign, a story shared around a table. What began as something we held in our hands becomes something we build together. Part game, part mythology, part world we can step inside.
And I learned how to play, old stuff, Battletech, Games Workshop stuff, some cool stuff that's been around for a long time, D&D. And I've always been enthralled with making adventures and little figures. I'm a huge toy guy, love toys. And so, but the miniatures, there's something about them. There was a Risk game that was more of a Japan Shogun, and those miniatures were amazing because you had the Shoguns, you had the ninja, it was cool. And so I'd make my own games with that ever since I was a little kid. So, I've been doing this for a long time.
Especially since Stranger Things had come out and promoted their whole D&D sessions that they have in the show. The whole D&D community has started rising so much because of that. I love playing fantasy games. That's what these tattoos are from, my elf character that I have in my video games that I play.
As toys step off shelves and out of boxes, they find immersive experiences in the strangest places, like Conan's sword, Thor's warhammer, or Barbie's convertible. The dice, once small, simple objects in our hand, become storytellers. The dice may be small, but they hold suspense, chance, victory, failure, and fate. In Geekdom, even the smallest object can open a door to an entire universe.
I like to buy a lot of vintage toys because the quality and perception of some of those vintage toys we can't match today. You just can't make them. There's no way. They're made out of metal. They're made out of harder plastics that we just don't use. So with those toys, I want the perfect box and in everything so that no one's touched it and not touched by anybody. And then I want the one that's been touched. And sometimes I even buy beat up toys because it just looks so cool. Someone loved that toy so much, they've worn off all the paint. I had no idea C-3PO was brown because they'd worn off all of the chrome. That kind of stuff is fun. I'm sure it's an addiction. I'm sure there's a little dopamine rush I get from getting that stuff and finding that stuff.
But before a toy becomes beloved, it has to become real. And that part is less magic wand, more problem solving. Sketch, sculpt, scale, articulation, color, packaging, cost. A toy may feel effortless in the hand, but behind it is a long chain of creative decisions and a surprising amount of faith.
If you want to make a toy these days, there are a lot of tools for you to do it. When I got into the industry 20 years ago, it was professionals working in that industry for years and decades to make something. And customizers were rare and in between. Now these days, everybody is customizing their toys. And a large amount of people are now making their own toys.
So I worked at MGA Entertainment, which is the maker of Bratz, and I worked on the packaging for about 2 years. I jumped from various big name toy companies, and then all the while I was coming up with my own creations. And these were creations that, came from my own mind, not from cartoons that existed or anything.
We're seeing an explosion of independent toy people, where you used to be able to have to make a clay sculpt, reverse mold it, now get a resin injected to make a prototype.
Usually I start with, an idea of something I really like, and I'll draw it. We call them turns. We'll draw the front, side, and back. I'm not a sculptor myself, but I have many friends, or I can find someone who then sculpts it either by hand. Like some of this and this are sculpted by hand. I mean, someone takes clay or wax and builds it up for me, and he bases it off my drawing. And then that gets sent to a factory. These are made in Japan, so it gets sent to a factory in Japan where they chop it up and they figure out the articulation. They make a metal mold of it, and then they pour hot vinyl into it, and then they kind of swish it around and let the vinyl solidify, and then they dump out the excess, and then the vinyl's super hot. So they get a pair of pliers and pull it out like a pair of rubber gloves. It's so soft. And then after about a few minutes, it solidifies and becomes hard. And then they cut out the holes and we can assemble the figure, and then I go and paint it.
We get a design that we want. We figure out on the scale that we want to do, how many points of articulation, how many colors, because that contributes to your overall cost. What is your packaging? How are you going to sell it? How many of them are you going to need? You get a quote. I have a factory in Vietnam. And then they will make what you want. They'll do all the 3D and say, hey, how does this look? And you're like, yeah, it looks good, but the nose is too big and the butt's too small. And make that fix. Bob's your uncle. You got a toy in about 6 months.
But as technology advances, so too does greater opportunity.
3D printing has become so affordable that for the cost of a microwave, you could have a 3D printer. And with that 3D printer, it means you can make your own toys. And so there's a lot of people now that are just like, why am I going to spend all this money to buy something when I can make it?
But then one of the great temples of childhood shopping disappeared.
Buffer is Toys R Us would buy toys knowing Christmas is 9 months away. We can just hold on to them. Walmart and Target don't want to hold on to anything. So those big orders you would get have now become lots of little small orders that aren't near the kind of production model you used to have. So when you're making toys, the more you buy, the cheaper they are. So now you're buying less and they're becoming more expensive. So the death of Toys R Us meant every other toy now costs more.
As traditional retail became harder to access, conventions became something more than fan gatherings. For independent creators, they became storefronts, testing grounds, networking rooms, and sometimes the first place a character found its audience.
Started vending at Comic-Con in 2011, I think. Started selling hyperactive monkey kids, and it was just a t-shirt and a couple of postcards. From there it grew. We realized oh hey, there's an audience for this. I think that was right when Hollywood was kind of really taking over, and it was it's not gonna lie, it's hard because you're not well known, you're not on a TV stage, you don't have a show, you're all creative, and the only way people are gonna find you out is through Comic-Con. And I think it was those first years were tough, and you're just overshadowed by a lot of Hollywood. These past few years, it's really gotten back to comics and trading cards and toys and things. I think it's kind of great. I think for me, I don't mind. We're all like one family. We all help one another out, you know, so I love it.
I started going to shows as an early teenager. I think I even set up my own stuff at a convention at 14. I went in and sold at the show. It was like $25 for a table. And I sold my own toys, my own comics, got money, spent that money at the show to buy new stuff. And I just never stopped. I found a new way to get more toys. I only work so hard so I can buy more stuff.
There's just so much traffic, the amount of people that come through. And even if they don't buy anything from it, they just get to put eyes on it. Like, oh, that's cool. Or I'll have a postcard. I'd love to check out your website. And I think the greatest part too is like, you know, like my wife says, this is an expensive hobby, but I've had people come up and say like, we love this style. We want you to work on this project. And then it becomes like a hyperactive monkey collaboration with something else, which is great. You know, so my wife calls me a geek. My kids think I'm a geek, but it's like, that's all I know.
Beneath the spectacle, the booths, and the crowds, this culture runs on imagination and on characters people want to follow. A toy can begin as a sketch, a shirt, a story, or a strange little creature on a table. But when people connect to it, it can grow into something bigger.
So Conan the Barbarian is created by Robert E. Howard for the pulps, and that's in the 30s, yeah? These books remain in print over the years, and in the 1970s, Marvel, whose editors are big pulp fans, Stan and Roy Thomas, who run Marvel Comics, big fans of Conan, so they license it and they create the Marvel comic book. So now it's a comic book and it becomes a very successful comic book and it embeds itself in popular culture to the point that John Milius, the filmmaker, makes Conan the Barbarian the movie. And then what happens is you have it kind of widen out so it becomes movies, it's comic books, it's music albums, it's reprints of the original pulps now as paperbacks. And that's how you get a pop culture empire based on one IP.
Originally started as a t-shirt and people like, what is this? We'd love to see it in a book. So we created a whole children's line of books. But we do have, you know, like toys that you can play with, like our plush.
One of the things that I designed early in the 2000s was Tron Stitch for a Disney art show at D23. And it was called a 626 Experiment by Mindstyle. I'm a big Tron fan. And Disney came down and said, oh, this is all very nice. We like that one. And it got boosted from being a one of one as an art project to a limited run to be a Comic-Con exclusive. And with the Tron Legacy movie coming out, it was then released in conjunction with Tron Legacy, which I also worked on as a painter, and I did the toys in the kids' room in Tron Legacy.
My father passed away. And when my father passed, I took all the stories I was just telling you as a little kid, and I turned it into a novel, and I wrote my own IP, because that was the way for me to sort of, you know, well, A, grasp with something so horrific happening in my life, but B, go with what my passion always was. So I wrote the book to become a game, to become toys, in hopes one day my story could get out there, because a lot of it is, I mean, think about it. We all have our own dragons. We all have our own dragons. Mine was football. I tried out for the NFL, tried out for many different teams, the Raiders, the Niners, the Seahawks. You know, I never really made it. I would get injured. Something crazy would happen. I have to finish this. I have to do this for my father, for our legacy.
If you wanted to make your own toy, the biggest advice I was ever given, and that I can give anyone else, is don't give up on it. Because the pressure to give up on what you want to do is intense. Everyone's going to come at you from every angle and say, get a real job, do something more productive, stop playing with toys. And the only way to show them is to keep doing it.
Toys begin as objects in our hands, small things built for a child's imagination. But almost immediately, they become something more. They teach us how to invent worlds, assign meaning, act out danger, become heroes, and hold on to pieces of ourselves before we even know who we are. The toys we love early in life don't always stay behind in childhood. Sometimes They become the first language of who we are. Welcome to the Geekdom. Come as you are.